Rose Wilson was pushing her cleaning cart down aisle 6 when the sound hit her. Sharp, panicked, the kind of cry that slices straight through the buzz of freezer motors and makes your heart stop. She didn't hesitate. She dropped her mop and hurried toward the noise. At the end of the aisle, under the harsh glare of fluorescent lights, a little girl sat in a wheelchair, trembling so violently her pink stuffed cat kept slipping from her grip. Her small hands were clamped over her ears, her breaths coming too fast, too shallow. The shoppers nearby stared, whispered, steered their carts around her like she was an inconvenience instead of a terrified child. Rose knelt instantly. "Hey, sweetheart," she whispered, keeping her voice low and steady. "I'm right here, okay? You're safe. Breathe with me." The girl's sobs only grew sharper. The light above them flickered, reflecting painfully off the pale tile floor. Rose gently stepped between the girl and the brightness, blocking the glare. She'd seen this before. Sensory panic, the kind that could swallow a person whole. Her mother used to shake like this on bad days, when noise, lights, and life became too much. Hit the subscribe button and comment where you are watching from so you can always get updated of more thrilling stories. "It's too bright for you, huh?" Rose murmured. "Let's fix that." She moved to the wall panel beside the freezer cases and lowered the lights in the aisle until the glare softened. Then she crouched again, her face level with the girl's. "Hold your cat tight," she said softly. "Just like that, good. Okay, sweetheart, can you tell me your name?" The girl's trembling eased a little. Sarah." "That's a beautiful name," Rose whispered. "Is someone with you, Sarah?" Sarah breathed shakily, pointing toward the front of the store. "My dad. We got separated. It was too loud. I couldn't." "It's okay," Rose soothed. "You're not alone. We'll find him together." She placed a hand gently on the wheelchair handle, waiting for Sarah to nod before she moved her. The little girl clutched her stuffed cat to her chest as Rose guided her slowly down the aisle. As they rounded the corner, Rose spotted a man near the checkout counters, an immaculate navy suit stretched over a frame carved from tension, tattoos spiraling up his neck. He was speaking quickly, voice tight with panic. "She can't move on her own. She's paralyzed. She was right next to me. Please, check your cameras. I need to find my daughter." "Daddy!" The word shattered the moment. He whipped around, and his entire face broke apart with relief. He ran toward them, dropping to his knees beside Sarah. "Oh, Tesoro! I thought I'd lost you." Sarah clung to him, her tiny fingers digging into his jacket. When he finally looked up, his dark eyes landed on Rose. There was shock there, yes, but also gratitude. Deep. Unexpected. "You helped her?" he asked, voice rough. Rose opened her mouth to speak. "Rose Wilson." Her supervisor's shrill voice cracked across the store like a whip. She stormed over, face mottled red. "What exactly do you think you're doing? Leaving your station? Touching store controls without permission? Interfering with customers?" "She was in distress," Rose said quietly. I don't want to hear it. You're a cleaner, not a caretaker. You're fired. Effective immediately. Hand in your apron and get out." Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Sarah whimpered. The man in the suit rose slowly, dangerously. But Rose didn't stay to see what would happen next. She just lowered her head, whispered, "Goodbye, sweetheart," and walked away before her shaking legs could betray her. She packed her few things into a cardboard box. Her water bottle, her off-brand gloves, the tiny picture of her mother, and stepped out into the parking lot. The afternoon air felt too bright, too empty. She'd lost the one job she could hold on to, for helping a child. Then she heard footsteps. "Miss Wilson." "Wait." Rose turned. The man in the suit was striding toward her, Sarah's wheelchair rolling beside him. Up close, he was even more intimidating. Broad shoulders, cold eyes, the presence of someone used to being obeyed. But when he spoke, his voice surprised her. "What happened in there was wrong," he said. "You helped my daughter when everyone else chose to look away." Rose swallowed. "It's fine. I don't regret helping her." "It isn't fine," he said quietly. What you did. It meant something. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. My name is Santino Morello. The name hit her like a physical shock. Everyone knew that name. Everyone feared it. He didn't give her time to respond. You helped my daughter, he said again, slower this time. You protected her, calmed her, saw her when she needed someone the most. He exhaled, something shifting in his expression. People in my world don't do that. They don't help unless they want something. I didn't want anything, Rose whispered. I know, he said. Then he straightened, dangerous, powerful, resolute. You're coming with me, he said. You work for me now. Rose's breath caught. I what? Doing what? Being with Sarah. Protecting her. Being the voice she listens to. His eyes softened, just barely. I can't care for her alone. Not the way she needs. Sarah reached forward, her small hand opening and closing toward Rose. Please, don't go, she whispered. You make the world quiet. And just like that, the ground shifted beneath Rose's feet. She thought she'd lost everything in that store. But this moment in an empty parking lot, with a paralyzed child reaching for her and the most feared man in the city asking her to stay, was where her life began to change. It wasn't the end. It was the door to a world she never imagined, and one she might never escape. Rose had thought she could hold herself together until she reached the bus stop, but the moment she pushed through the supermarket's sliding doors, everything inside her crumpled. The cardboard box in her arms felt heavier with every step. Her cheap gloves, her water bottle, the little photo of her mother tucked into the corner. Her entire job reduced to a box that didn't even weigh 3 pounds. The afternoon sun hit her too brightly, too honestly. She blinked rapidly, willing the sting in her eyes not to spill over. She'd been fired before, twice, actually, but never like that. Never for doing the one thing she believed she was put on earth to do. She reached the far corner of the parking lot and set the box on the asphalt, rubbing her arms against the cold. The wind pulled at her apron, flipping the loose end like a flag of defeat. She closed her eyes. One act of kindness, and she was unemployed again. Rose Wilson. Her eyes snapped open. Heavy footsteps pounded across the pavement. She turned just in time to see him, tall, broad-shouldered, tattoos visible beneath the cuff of his perfect suit. Santino Morello moved like someone people parted for, someone who never had to say excuse me. But right now, he wasn't fearsome. He was frantic. And behind him, rolling in her wheelchair with surprising speed, was Sarah. Rose straightened, brushing her cheeks quickly. Mr. Morello, you shouldn't be. Don't, he cut in, breath heavy but controlled. Don't walk away yet. Rose swallowed. I'm not trying to cause trouble. Your daughter's safe. That's all. That's not all, he snapped, but not unkindly. That is not all, Miss Wilson. Sarah clutched her stuffed cat tightly as Santino guided her closer. For a moment, no one spoke. The wind carried the distant rumble of cars from the street, the clatter of shopping carts being gathered by the teenage clerks. Life went on around them, ordinary and indifferent. Santino finally drew in a slow breath. What happened in there, he said, voice steady, was wrong. Rose's throat squeezed. She shook her head. I was on the clock. I left my station. She didn't have to fire me, but... She fired you for helping my child, he said sharply. A paralyzed child who was terrified and alone. Rose flinched, guilt tightening her stomach. I wasn't trying to undermine anyone. I just saw her struggling. You saw her, he echoed, softer this time, when everyone else looked away. Santino knelt beside Sarah's wheelchair and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His hands, large, inked, dangerous, were impossibly gentle. I owe you more than a thank you, he said. Rose didn't know what to do with that. She had no idea how to stand, how to breathe, how to speak in front of a man whose name people whispered the way others whispered ghost stories. She stepped back instinctively. Mr. Morello, you don't owe me anything. I just did what anyone would. No, he said sharply. Not anyone. Not one person in that store moved. You did. He rose to his full height, the shift in him commanding enough to make Rose's heartbeat thrum painfully in her ears. I want to offer you a job. Rose blinked. A job? As Sarah's full-time caregiver, he said. You understood her panic before she spoke a single word. You calmed her faster than the therapists I've paid fortunes for. Sarah reached her hand toward Rose, fingers curling. Daddy, she whispered. She helped me breathe. Rose's chest tightened so sharply she had to look up at the sky for a second. Santino continued. You will live at my estate. You'll have your own room, full benefits, flexible hours. And I'll pay you 3 times what you made in that store. The words slammed into Rose like a physical force. Live at your estate, she repeated, voice thin. Yes, he affirmed, eyes locking onto hers. You will be safe there. And my daughter will be safe with you. Everything in Rose recoiled at the idea, not from the girl, but from the man. She knew what Santino Morello was. Everyone did. The underworld king. The man who brokered peace with violence. The one with more blood on his hands than the city morgue saw in a week. Working in his home. Living under his roof. Becoming tied to the Mafia? Rose's stomach twisted. Mr. Morello, I can't. I'm not qualified for something like that. And your life, your family, the danger around you. He stepped closer, lowering his voice to something unexpectedly gentle. I am not asking you to be part of my world, he said. Only hers. Sarah watched them both with wide, fragile eyes. Her voice, soft, trembling, broke the air. Please, don't go. Rose inhaled sharply. You make the world quiet, Sarah whispered. That was it. That was the moment the ground beneath Rose shifted, tilted, and realigned itself. Her knees weakened. Her breath caught. She looked at Sarah, the small girl who had shaken in terror under fluorescent lights, who had trusted her voice, who now held out her hand like she held out her entire heart. Then she looked at Santino, the man no one said no to. The man offering her a life she had never imagined she could have. And he wasn't threatening her. He wasn't manipulating her. He wasn't even pressuring her. He was asking, waiting. Hope, yes, hope, flickered behind those dark eyes. The wind tugged at Rose's apron again. Her old life flapped behind her like something already loosening its grip. She whispered, Okay. Santino blinked. Okay. Rose nodded once, steadying herself. I'll do it. I'll help Sarah. Sarah's entire face lit. Santino exhaled a breath that sounded like relief carved into sound. Good, he said quietly. Then let's go home. He lifted Rose's box from the ground before she could stop him. Sarah held out her hand again, and Rose took it gently, walking beside her. Whatever home meant to a man like Santino Morello, she was about to find out. And as they crossed the parking lot together, Maid, Mafia King, and Trembling Child, Rose felt something shift inside her. A beginning. And a warning. If this moment touched your heart, like or share this video that celebrates people who step up when no one else will. They walked toward the waiting black car at the curb, and Rose realized she wasn't going back to the life she'd known. She was stepping into something far deeper, far darker, far more dangerous, and possibly far more beautiful. The car ride felt longer than it was. Rose sat in the back beside Sarah, who kept her stuffed cat tucked tightly under her arm as though it were the only thing tethering her to safety. Santino sat across from them, silent, unreadable in the dim interior lighting. The city blurred by the tinted windows, shop signs, street lamps, people rushing through their evening routines, all unaware of the strange, dangerous shift happening inside the sleek black vehicle. Rose kept her hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling. She'd said yes. She'd agreed to go with a mafia boss and his fragile, paralyzed daughter to a home she couldn't picture, in a world she'd only heard whispered about in cautionary tales. Sarah's small fingers brushed Rose's sleeve. You're really coming with us? Rose smiled softly. I'm right here, sweetheart. Santino's gaze flicked up. Not the cold stare she expected, but a calm, observing one, as though he was trying to memorize the way Rose's voice steadied the child. 20 minutes later, the car slowed before a set of towering wrought iron gates. They opened without a single word exchanged, security cameras tilting to follow their path. Rose sucked in a breath as the estate came into view. An enormous stone mansion perched on acres of manicured gardens, water fountains, and statues carved so precisely they looked alive. "This is where you live," she whispered. Sarah nodded lightly, but her grip on Rose tightened. 2 guards waited at the top of the steps, dressed in black suits, hands clasped behind their backs. Their eyes swept over Rose with the same silent assessment they gave strangers in dangerous territory. Santino exited first. A guard approached and murmured something to him. Santino's jaw tightened before he simply nodded, dismissing the man. When he opened Rose's door, the tension still lingered in the line of his shoulders. "Don't mind them," he said quietly. "They're here to protect." But Sarah cut him off with a whimper. She didn't want him. She wanted Rose. The little girl grabbed her hand, pulling her closer as Santino reached for her wheelchair. His face flickered, something unreadable, almost wounded, before he stepped aside and let Rose help. Inside the mansion, the atmosphere shifted. It was beautiful, yes. Polished marble floors, gold-accented walls, chandeliers dripping crystals like ice, but beneath the beauty lay something else. Something heavy. Watching. Rose's steps echoed as she followed Santino through the grand foyer. Portraits lined the walls. Generations of Morellos, stern-faced men and regal women. Rose stopped at one painting, a woman with raven hair and gentle eyes, holding a baby wrapped in a white blanket. "Sarah's mother," Santino said abruptly. Rose turned to find him standing closer than she expected. His voice was steady, but his eyes had the same shadow she'd seen in Sarah's panic, a look of someone who'd held too much pain for too long. "She died when Sarah was 2, he continued. "I've tried to do what she would have wanted." The way he looked at the portrait, Rose felt the truth in that. Not perfection. Not all the right choices. But trying. A voice interrupted them. "Sir, you're back early." A housekeeper, maybe mid-50s, with a bun pulled so tight it looked painful, approached with a stiff bow. Her eyes fell on Rose. Judging. Curious. Unfriendly. "This is Miss Wilson," Santino said. "She'll be staying here from now on." The housekeeper blinked once, recovering quickly. "I see. I'll prepare a room." "For now," Santino added, "she'll stay near Sarah's suite." The housekeeper hesitated. "Sir, the East Wing." "I know what I said," Santino cut in. The woman bowed again and retreated. Rose exhaled. The tension in this house wasn't imagined. It lived here, threaded into every corner. Santino turned to her. "Follow me. I'll show you where Sarah sleeps." The suite was lovely. Soft lighting, pale walls, plush toys lining the shelves. But Rose noticed the details others might miss. Blackout curtains drawn tight. Soundproof padding discreetly hidden behind wallpaper. A specialized bed with rails. Medical equipment neatly stored but still present. This wasn't just a child's room. It was a sanctuary built for a girl whose world could collapse with a single sound. "Do you like it?" Santino asked Sarah. Sarah nodded but pointed to Rose, asking silently if she could stay. "For tonight," Santino said softly, "Miss Wilson will stay nearby." Sarah relaxed instantly. Rose knelt beside her. "You're safe here, sweetheart. This room. It's beautiful." Santino watched them again, gratitude touching his eyes, but something else behind it too. A longing Rose couldn't decipher. He cleared his throat. "There's something you should know," he said to Rose. "About Sarah. About why she's paralyzed." Rose sat up straight. "You don't have to." "I do." His voice dropped. "You deserve the truth if you're going to care for her." He gestured for her to follow him into the hallway. When they were alone, his expression hardened, not at her, but at something carved deep in his memory. "The attack wasn't random," he said. "It wasn't an accident. It was meant for me." Rose froze. Santino continued, eyes fixed on the floor. A rival family wanted to hurt me. They thought, if they couldn't kill me, they could take what mattered most. Rose's breath caught. They targeted her? She wasn't supposed to be there. His voice cracked, just barely. I was supposed to be in that place at that time. Not her. She paid the price for my life. For the first time, Rose felt something like pity for the man. A man who carried guilt like chains. She reached out instinctively. That wasn't your fault. He didn't flinch from her touch. He looked at her, not as a mafia boss, but as a grieving father burdened beyond measure. There is more, he murmured. The family who did it, they're still out there. Her pulse quickened. You mean, they might try again? They've been quiet too long, he said. Quiet in my world is never good. Rose's throat tightened. She wasn't just stepping into a new job. She was stepping into a war she didn't understand. Santino must have sensed her fear. You will not be in danger, he said firmly. You'll have protection. Sarah will have protection. I'd never allow anything else. His promise was iron, sharp and sure. But Rose knew even steel bent under enough force. They returned to Sarah's room. The girl sat in her bed, hugging her stuffed cat, eyes following Rose the moment she entered. I'm not going anywhere, Rose said softly. I'm staying with you. Sarah's shoulders dropped in relief. Santino watched the exchange with a look Rose couldn't name. Gratitude. Wonder. Maybe fear. Fear of losing what was finally bringing light back into his daughter's life. Rose smoothed Sarah's blanket, tucking her in. The girl clung to her hand. Don't leave, she whispered. Never without telling you, Rose replied. She felt Santino's eyes on her again. Studying. Measuring. Trusting. The room dimmed as the lamp glowed warmly, and for the first time since Rose entered the mansion, she felt a flicker of belonging. Fragile, uncertain, but real. Outside the window, a shadow moved near the garden hedge. A guard. Or something else. Rose's breath hitched. Danger wasn't just a story here. It lived outside these walls. It hunted this family. And now, it hunted the girl who trusted her most. Stories like this remind us how fragile life can be. If you want more stories that honor resilience, feel free to subscribe. Inside the estate's quiet halls, as Sarah drifted to sleep, Rose realized something. She thought she had entered the Morello mornings in the Morello estate were quiet, but not peaceful. It was the kind of silence that felt managed, a silence held together by fear, by rules, by the invisible pressure of people who walked carefully in the presence of a man like Santino Morello. But for Rose, the day began with something gentler. Sarah. The girl was already awake when Rose entered her room, sitting upright with her stuffed cat tucked under her chin. She didn't speak, but her eyes softened the second she saw Rose. Good morning, sweetheart, Rose whispered, keeping her voice low, soft enough not to overwhelm, warm enough to soothe. Sarah didn't answer, but she lifted her hands slightly, a silent request for help getting out of bed. Rose smiled and moved to her side, gently adjusting the wheelchair. Small steps. Quiet cues. A language of gestures that Rose was learning day by day. Santino watched from the doorway. He didn't speak either, not yet. For a man built by violence and power, watching someone handle his daughter with such tenderness seemed to unravel him in ways he couldn't explain. Rose wheeled Sarah toward the window, opening the curtains carefully so sunlight slipped in without flooding the room. We'll start with 3 things we see, Rose said softly. Just like we practiced. Sarah hesitated, then looked out the window. Bird, she whispered. Rose's heart fluttered. Words were rare. Precious. Yes, she breathed. A little sparrow. What else? Sarah pointed. Tree. And one more. After a long pause, Sarah turned slightly toward Rose and touched her arm. You, she whispered. Rose swallowed hard. I'm honored. Behind them, Santino exhaled like he'd been holding his breath the whole time. Over the next week, Rose built a quiet routine, a predictable rhythm that wrapped Sarah in safety. Morning visual check-ins. Breathing exercises with stuffed animals. Short strolls around the garden, avoiding the noisy fountain, reading time in a sunlit corner, and always, always, soft speech and gentle presence. The transformation was slow but real. Sarah's panic episodes became less intense. She startled less when the staff passed her in the halls. She began humming, quiet notes, barely audible, whenever Rose brushed her hair. Then came the first laugh. A real laugh. Rose had been telling her a silly story about a cat who refused to nap unless someone sang to him. She didn't even realize she'd raised her voice slightly, animated, playful, until Sarah suddenly burst into a tiny giggle. Rose froze. Sarah froze too, then giggled again. The sound was small, but bright. A spark in a mansion full of shadows. Santino stepped in at that exact moment. He stopped midway through the doorway, stunned, like he'd walked in on a miracle. His hand tightened around the doorknob, knuckles turning white. His eyes glistened, not fully tears, but something close. "She hasn't laughed since," he whispered, unable to finish. Rose smiled at him gently. "She's safe now. Safe enough to laugh." Santino swallowed, working past emotions he wasn't used to letting show. "Because of you." Not everyone was pleased. Jealous eyes followed Rose wherever she went. Two maids whispered openly near the laundry hallway. "That girl thinks she runs the place now. She's here 1 week and already has the boss's attention. Can you imagine?" Another snorted. "She won the child over. Next thing you know, she'll be sitting at the family table." Rose kept walking, pretending she didn't hear. But their words stuck to her like burrs. Even the butler, Mr. Rinaldi, seemed colder each passing day. He'd always been stiff, but now he avoided looking at Rose altogether. She wasn't trying to take anyone's place. She was just trying to help a little girl. Still, tension buzzed through the halls, low, insidious, waiting. That night, Sarah had a panic episode. It started with a sound, someone dropping a tray in the kitchen. The metallic crash echoed down the corridor like a gunshot. Sarah gasped and froze, hands trembling. Rose rushed to her. "It's okay, sweetheart. It's just a noise. You're safe." Sarah's breathing quickened. She curled inward, whispering, "Too loud, too loud, too loud." Rose knelt in front of her, blocking the hallway lights. "Let's do our squeeze, okay? Squeeze the arms of your chair like we practiced." Sarah squeezed. Rose guided her through grounding. 4 things she saw, 3 things she heard, 2 she could touch. Slowly, beautifully, Sarah's breathing eased. Her shoulders dropped. Her tiny hand reached for Rose's. "I'm okay," she whispered. Santino rounded the corner then, gun drawn, eyes wild, scanning for threats. When he saw the scene, he froze again. Not the fearsome Mafia boss. Just a father who'd run toward the sound, terrified something had happened to his daughter. He put the gun away slowly, his jaw tight. "Is she all right?" "She's okay now," Rose said, still kneeling. "She did the work." She pulled herself back. Santino's eyes softened. "With your help." He crouched beside them, but didn't touch Sarah. He knew better. Instead, he whispered, "I'm proud of you, my little star." Sarah gave him a weak but real smile. Then she leaned her head against Rose's shoulder. Santino watched silently. Dangerous men didn't cry, he'd always been taught. But Rose could see the truth, the way his face creased, the way grief and love tangled behind his eyes. He needed this quiet as much as his daughter did. He needed Rose far more than he'd ever admit aloud. Later that night, Rose stepped out onto the terrace for fresh air. The moonlight washed over the stone walls of the estate, revealing just how massive and guarded it truly was. Footsteps approached behind her. Santino. He stood beside her, hands in his pockets, looking out at the gardens. "You've changed her world," he said softly, "in ways no doctor or therapist has been able to." Rose shook her head. Sarah just needed someone who understands. Someone patient. "You're more than that," he murmured. "You're the only person she trusts." The weight of his words pressed into her. Dangerous territory. Tender territory. She didn't know how to respond, so she stayed silent. After a moment he added, "Some people in the house may not appreciate your presence. If anyone troubles you, tell me." Rose nodded, though unease flickered through her chest. "I won't let anything happen to you," Santino said. "To either of you." His vow felt heavier than the night air. But somehow, Rose believed him. Over the next days, she continued building Sarah's world, one gentle routine at a time. The little girl laughed more, spoke more, trusted more. And every time she did, Santino's hardened exterior cracked just a little bit further. Let me know in the comments if you've ever seen a child open up to someone unexpected. These stories matter. World to help a little girl. But the truth was far deeper. She had stepped into the center of a storm. The storm began long before the first gunshot. It started with a flicker. Rose had just finished brushing out Sarah's hair, humming softly as the little girl traced circles on her stuffed cat's worn ear. Outside, the estate grounds were unusually still. The guards moved with tense precision, radios clipped to their belts, eyes scanning the shadows. Rose didn't know what they feared, but she could feel it. Something had shifted. Something was coming. Sarah noticed too. She kept glancing toward the window, her breaths short and quick. "Too quiet," she whispered. Rose smoothed her hair. Sometimes quiet is just quiet. But the truth settled in Rose's gut like a stone. This quiet was wrong. This quiet was waiting. The power cut out at 7:14 p.m. Every light in the Morello estate blinked once, twice, and died, plunging the halls into a suffocating darkness. Sarah jolted, her hands flying to her ears. "It's okay," Rose whispered, heart pounding harder than the words allowed. "I'm right here, sweetheart." The emergency lights flickered on, casting the mansion in a deep, eerie red glow. Rose froze. Not again. Not another panic attack. But before she could reach for the flashlight on the dresser, she heard it, the unmistakable crack of gunfire outside the east wing. Then another. Then screaming voices. Not from the staff. From men Rose had never heard before. Men breaking in. Her blood turned to ice. The rival family. The one Santino warned her about. They had come. And they were inside. "Rose," Sarah whispered, barely audible. "What's happening?" Rose crouched low, gripping the wheelchair handles with trembling hands. "We're going to be safe, sweetheart. I promise." A lie. But she needed Sarah calm, not frozen in terror. More gunfire erupted, closer this time. Shouts thundered down the hallway. Rose's instincts kicked in like a fire alarm. She grabbed Sarah's stuffed cat, tucked it against the girl's chest, and pushed the wheelchair toward the back of the suite. "Hold on tight, Sarah. Hold on." The hallway lights blinked, sparks crackling through the wires overhead. Somewhere downstairs, glass shattered like falling stars. Rose's breath sharpened. They were inside the mansion. They were coming up the stairs. She wheeled Sarah toward the kitchen storeroom attached to the east corridor, a space she'd noticed during her first week. Hidden. Narrow. Easy to overlook unless you knew it was there. Exactly what she needed. The metal pantry door squeaked as she forced it open. The scent of spices and old wood filled the tiny space. Rose repositioned Sarah's wheelchair, pushed it inside, and squeezed in beside her. The door clicked shut. Darkness swallowed them whole. Rose crouched low, curling herself protectively over Sarah. "Breathe with me," she whispered, voice shaking. "In, out, in, out." Sarah clutched her stuffed cat like a lifeline. "Too loud," she whimpered. "Too loud." But the loud hadn't even begun. Footsteps thundered down the hall. Not calm, orderly guard footsteps. These were heavy, rushed, violent. Men hunting. Rose pressed a hand over Sarah's ears and prayed. Prayed for Santino to be near, prayed for the guards to hold, prayed for the pantry door to remain invisible. She didn't get her prayer. A voice shouted from the hall. "Search every room." Sarah jolted. Rose tightened her grip, forcing herself not to cry. Not now. "Shoo. I've got you." The footsteps multiplied. Doors slammed open. Furniture crashed. Guns clicked. Then, the worst sound. Boots stopped directly in front of the pantry door. Rose's heart stopped. Sarah whimpered. Rose pulled the girl's head into her chest, covering her as much as she could. Her own body trembled so hard she feared the men outside would hear her shaking. The doorknob rattled. "Oh God!" Rose whispered. The door burst open. A beam of light pierced the darkness. Two men stood in the doorway, masked, armed, eyes cold and hungry for violence. The sight of Sarah's wheelchair made them freeze for only a second. Then both guns lifted, pointed directly at them. "Don't, please!" Rose cried, raising a hand instinctively. One attacker sneered. "If she's his kid, she dies first." His finger tightened on the trigger. Rose didn't think. Her body moved before her mind caught up. She threw herself over Sarah, arms, torso, head, shielding the small fragile girl under her entire weight. The pantry exploded with sound. Bullets ripped through the walls, through the shelves, through the bags of flour above her head. Wood cracked. Metal shrieked. Rose's ears rang violently, drowning out everything except Sarah's terrified sobs. Another bullet tore into the wall inches from Rose's spine. Pain flared. She didn't care. She pressed harder over Sarah, whispering, "I'm here, I'm here, I'm here," like a mantra against death. She expected to feel the burn of a bullet at any moment. She expected agony. She expected the end. But something stopped the next shot. A new sound. A roar. A voice she'd never heard like this before. Dark, primal, murderous. Santino. He hit the hallway like a hurricane. Gunfire thundered. Men screamed. Bodies hit the walls. The pantry shook with the violence exploding just outside it. Then silence. Not the silence of peace. The silence of aftermath. Rose didn't move. She couldn't. Her arms were still wrapped tight around Sarah, her breath shaking uncontrollably. The pantry door swung open slowly. Rose flinched. Then she heard it. Rose. His voice. Not the Mafia king. Not the feared enforcer. But a father. A man breaking. "Rose. Look at me." She lifted her head. Santino stood there, breathing hard, blood splattered across his shirt, gun still trembling in his hand. His eyes scanned the scene. The bullet holes. The torn shelves. The flour covering Rose and Sarah. The girl trembling beneath Rose's arms. And Rose herself, shaking, pale, shielding his daughter with her own body. Something inside him shattered. He dropped to his knees. His gun hit the floor with a metallic clatter. He reached for Sarah first, checking her frantically, hands trembling, breath uneven, like he feared she'd vanish. Then his eyes lifted to Rose. And he broke. His chest heaved. His jaw clenched so tightly it trembled. When he spoke, his voice cracked. "You shielded her." His hand hovered, afraid to touch her, afraid she was hurt. "You covered her with your body." Rose tried to steady her breathing. "I had to." "No," his voice shook harder. "You chose to." Sarah reached up and touched Rose's cheek, wiping a tear she didn't know had fallen. Santino watched the gesture, and something in him gave way completely. For the first time in years, he wasn't the untouchable Mafia king. He was a father on his knees. A man who had nearly lost everything. Because without Rose, he would have. He swallowed hard. "Rose. I." But words failed him. He simply pulled both of them into his arms, carefully, gently, reverently, like they were the only precious things left in a world made of violence. Rose felt his tears on her shoulder. Tears he didn't bother hiding. Tears she never imagined a man like him could shed. She clung to Sarah with one hand, to Santino's trembling arm with the other, the three of them tangled in a moment born of terror and forged into something unbreakable. Santino whispered, "I'll never forget this. I'll never forget what you did. You'd die for her." He pulled back just enough to look into Rose's eyes. "And I would tear down the world for you because of it." Rose's breath caught. Not from fear. From the truth in his voice. The truth that changed everything. Share this if you've ever stood up for someone when it mattered most. The mansion felt different after the attack. Quieter. Heavier. Like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Security doubled overnight. Guards patrolled the hallways with weapons drawn. Cameras were installed at every angle, blinking like unblinking red eyes. No one laughed. No one spoke above a whisper. The entire estate had become a fortress built from fear. But the fear didn't belong to the staff. It belonged to Santino. Every time someone walked past Sarah's door, his eyes flicked up, sharp, assessing, dangerous. He hardly slept. Rose knew, because each time she stepped into the hallway at night to check on Sarah, she found him sitting outside the child's room like a sentry carved from stone. He'd nearly lost his daughter. And if Rose hadn't been there? No. Neither of them dared to finish that thought. 3 days after the attack, Santino finally asked Rose to come to his study. She stepped inside quietly, heart tapping against her ribs. The room was dimly lit, shadows spilling across old mahogany furniture and shelves lined with leather-bound books. Papers were scattered across the desk. Medical reports, security logs, photos, maps, and something darker beneath the stacks. Santino stood with his back to her, hands gripping the windowsill, shoulders tight as if holding the entire world on his back. "You're safe now," Rose said softly. "Sarah is safe. The guards. That wasn't a random attack." His voice cut through the air. Rose froze. Santino turned slowly, the lines on his face harsher than she had ever seen. The storm in his eyes hadn't calmed. It had deepened. "It was an inside betrayal," he said. "The same betrayal that caused Sarah's paralysis." Rose's breath caught. "Inside your organization?" He nodded once. The truth felt like ice sliding down her spine. She stepped closer. "What do you mean?" He picked up a medical report, a worn folder she'd seen in the hallways before but never questioned. He held it out to her. "I need you to see this." Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Sarah's name was printed across the top. Beneath it, charts, scans, explanations. But the numbers didn't make sense. The dates felt wrong. The injury description, inconsistent. Rose squinted. These aren't aligned. This scan says Sarah was treated at St. Margaret's Hospital, but this summary references Westlake Medical Center. Santino nodded. 2 different hospitals. 2 conflicting reports. Both supposedly from the same night. "Someone falsified this," Rose whispered. "Someone close." He paced, running a hand through his hair. "The night Sarah was paralyzed, I was supposed to be at that location. Someone leaked my movements. I changed plans at the last minute. I didn't show up." His voice cracked. "But Sarah did." Rose's stomach twisted. "Santino. They wanted to punish me," he said. "By hurting my child." The air turned sharp. Rose stepped closer before she even realized she was moving. "You said it was a rival family." "It was," he said. "But they couldn't have planned it without help from the inside." The betrayal wasn't just external. It lived under his roof. The next days were a blur of fragments. Whispers in hallways. Suspicious glances from staff. Guards exchanging coded looks. Phone calls that stopped abruptly when Rose walked by. And the medical report. It haunted her. Rose wasn't an investigator, but she knew how to listen. How to pay attention the way she used to do when her mother's episodes forced her to decode silence and tension like a second language. So she watched. She listened. She connected the dots others ignored. A maid mentioning that the East Wing cameras had been accidentally offline the night of the attack. A guard saying he knew the back routes too well. A whispered argument near the servants' staircase. The butler, Mr. Rinaldi, furious with someone, his voice tight with fear. But it was the housekeeper, Mrs. D'Angelo, who slipped up. Rose found her in the laundry room, clutching a folder too tightly. When the older woman noticed Rose standing in the doorway, she froze. And in that second, the truth screamed louder than any confession. Rose lowered her voice. "That belongs to Sarah, doesn't it?" The housekeeper's fingers curled around the folder protectively. "I don't know what you mean," she said quickly. But her eyes darted toward the staff corridor, toward escape, toward guilt. Rose stepped inside. "Mrs. D'Angelo, please. A child was hurt." "Who gave you that?" The woman's jaw clenched. Her eyes filled with something Rose didn't expect. Fear. Not of Santino. Of someone else. She whispered, "I can't. He'll kill me." The folder slipped from her shaking hands. Inside it, another medical document. The real one. Rose gasped. "This one isn't falsified. It shows Sarah's spinal compression wasn't from debris. It was from a targeted strike." The woman backed away. "I said nothing. If he finds out." "He." Rose pressed. "Who is he?" Mrs. D'Angelo's face twisted with guilt. "You should have never come here." Before Rose could ask more, the woman hurried out, vanishing down the corridor like a ghost. But Rose didn't need her to say the name. She already knew. That evening, Rose carried the folder to Santino's study. He was sitting alone, staring at a half-finished glass of whiskey he hadn't touched. When he saw the folder, his expression darkened. "What did you find?" Rose placed it on his desk. "You were right. Someone close to you falsified Sarah's medical records. Someone who wanted you to believe the attack wasn't intentional." Santino's jaw tightened. "Who?" Rose hesitated, not because she doubted, but because of the weight of what she was about to say. "Santino, it was someone in your family." His breath stilled. "Who?" he repeated, quieter this time. Rose swallowed hard. "Your cousin. Marco." The name fell into the room like a blade. Santino's knuckles whitened around the edge of his desk. Marco, the man Santino trusted with finances, strategy, and access to private schedules. The man who held the keys to every door in the estate. The man who should have protected Sarah like his own blood. Santino spoke through clenched teeth. "How do you know?" Rose opened the file. Marco signed off on the falsified transfer papers. His signature is on the digital log. He had access to the hospital. And the butler said. "The butler." Santino snapped. "He didn't say it directly," Rose replied. "But he was arguing with someone about the East Wing security feed, the night Sarah was hurt. He said he didn't want to be involved anymore." Santino stood, pacing, fists tight at his sides. Rose had never seen him this way, not during the store incident, not during the attack, not even when bullets tore into the pantry walls. This was different. This was betrayal in its purest, most unforgivable form. "He tried to kill me," Santino whispered. "And when he couldn't, he took Sarah instead." Rose stepped forward. "You're not alone in this." He stopped, looked at her. Something raw and unguarded cracked inside him. "You don't understand," he said, voice barely audible. "Marco was my brother in everything but blood. I trusted him with her life. With my life." His breath shook. "And he put her in that chair." Rose's chest ached at the pain in his voice. Without thinking, she reached out and touched his arm. He didn't pull away. Not this time. Not from her. "Let me help you," she whispered. He stared at her, eyes dark and hollow. "You already have," he said. "You're the only one who keeps her safe. The only one I can trust." His voice dropped lower. "The only one I can breathe around." The confession was soft, but it hit Rose like thunder. Her heart stumbled. Her breath tangled. Something inside her, something she had been trying to ignore, rose to the surface with terrifying clarity. She cared for him. Not just as Sarah's father. Not just as her employer. Not just as the man who protected her in ways no one ever had. It was something deeper. Something dangerous. Something she shouldn't feel. She stepped back, blinking fast. "Santino, we can't. This isn't." "I know," he said quickly. "But I had to say it." He looked away, struggling to rebuild the walls she had unknowingly dismantled. He added, voice breaking slightly, "I don't want you in danger. If you stay close to me, Marco will come after you too. Rose lifted her chin. I don't care. He turned sharply. Rose. I care about Sarah, she whispered. And you. Silence swallowed the room. He stared at her like her words were both a gift and a curse. Then he whispered, I'll handle Marco. How? She asked gently. He didn't answer, but the darkness in his eyes told her everything she needed to know. Marco had already been sentenced. He just didn't know it yet. In the quiet that followed, Santino reached for her hand. Their fingers didn't quite touch, but they were close enough to feel the truth humming between them. Close enough that Rose felt her heart give way to something she couldn't deny anymore. Something she feared. Something she wanted. Santino whispered, Thank you for not letting me face this alone. She answered, You never were. And for the first time since the night Sarah was hurt, Santino Morello allowed himself to lean. Not on power, not on violence, but on someone who saw him. Someone who chose him. Even when it meant stepping into danger. Even when it meant risking everything. Someone he was beginning to fall for. Someone who was beginning to fall for him too. Even if the world outside was ready to break them both. The Morello estate didn't breathe for 2 full days. Not until Marco Morello, the betrayer, the cousin Santino once trusted like a brother, was gone. No one saw the confrontation. No one heard the moment Santino ended it. But the staff felt the shift like a temperature drop, like the air itself releasing a held breath. And when Santino returned that night, clothes rumpled, face hollow, hands shaking just slightly, Rose understood without asking. Marco was no longer a threat. And the shadow that had followed this house since the night Sarah was paralyzed finally lifted. For the first time in years, the mansion felt calm. Not peaceful. Peace was too fragile a word, but steady. Even the guards seemed to relax. The tension in the hallways dissolved. Sarah slept through the night without bolting awake from nightmares. But Santino didn't sleep. Rose knew because each time she passed Sarah's door, he was standing nearby, leaning against the wall, head bowed, lost in a war only he could see. The man who carried entire empires on his shoulders suddenly looked like he was drowning in the aftermath. And Rose, she couldn't watch him drown. Not after everything. Not after what they survived together. That evening, Sarah fell asleep early, exhausted from a day of coloring and soft music. Rose tucked her in, brushed a curl from her forehead, and whispered a promise she always whispered now. I'm right outside if you need me. As she stepped into the hall, she nearly collided with Santino. He didn't startle. Dangerous men never did. But he did inhale sharply, as if her presence interrupted something heavy inside him. Is she asleep? He asked. Yes, Rose said softly. He nodded, but his eyes remained distant. Haunted. Rose hesitated before speaking again. Santino, when was the last time you rested? He didn't answer. Instead, he gestured toward the elevator leading to the basement level, the safe room only the inner circle had access to. Come with me, he said quietly. Rose followed without a word. The safe room was nothing like she imagined. It wasn't cold, metallic, or sterile like a bunker. It was warm. Soft lighting. A single couch. A wall lined with monitors showing every corner of the estate. A small table with untouched whiskey glasses. And silence. A silence thick with things neither of them had said yet. Santino walked to the center of the room, then stopped, back to her, shoulders bowed under another invisible weight. Rose approached slowly. Do you want to talk about it? He turned, and the look on his face made her breath catch. Santino Morello, the most feared man in the city, looked like he had finally reached the edge of something he could no longer carry alone. Rose, he whispered. Her name came out like a confession. She stepped closer. Tell me. He swallowed hard. I killed him. She nodded gently. I know. He was my blood, Santino said, voice rough. Not by birth, but by bond. I raised him, trained him, trusted him. And he sold me out like I was nothing. He hurt my daughter. He destroyed her life. His voice cracked. Rose's heart squeezed. She reached out, slow, cautious, and laid her hand on his arm. He didn't flinch. He leaned into her touch like a man starved for softness. "I did what I had to do," he continued. "But it doesn't make it hurt less." Rose stepped closer. "You protected your family. You protected Sarah. That's all she'll ever know." He closed his eyes, exhaling a breath that sounded like it had been trapped inside him for years. When he looked at her again, something had changed. Something unguarded. Something painfully vulnerable. "You didn't just save her," he said quietly. "You saved me." The words sank into Rose's chest like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. "Santino," she whispered, unsure how to carry the weight of the moment. But he stepped toward her slowly, carefully, like approaching something fragile he feared might shatter. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Since the moment you knelt beside her in that grocery store, you changed everything." He lifted a hand but paused before touching her. "I didn't know people like you existed anymore." "People like me," she breathed. He nodded once. "People who love without asking for something in return. People who calm storms they didn't create. People who run toward danger for a child who isn't theirs." Her heartbeat stumbled. Then he said the words she was terrified and aching to hear. "Rose, I'm falling for you." Silence. But not an empty silence. A full one. A trembling one. Rose felt her chest tighten. Her breath hitch. Her pulse race. She'd known, somewhere deep inside her, beneath fear, beneath confusion, that she was falling for him too. The man behind the Mafia walls. The father behind the tattooed skin. The broken heart behind the ruthless reputation. But she couldn't let emotion blind her, not when Sarah was involved. She lifted her hand and gently cupped his cheek. His eyes fluttered closed at her touch. "Santino," she whispered, "I care for you. More than I want to admit." His breath caught. "But Sarah comes first," Rose said softly but firmly. "Always. No matter what we feel." Santino opened his eyes. Dark, intense, but filled with something that wasn't dangerous for once. Respect. Admiration. Love forming like a sunrise. "I would never ask you to choose," he said. "Sarah is everything to me. I would never put her second. Not to anyone. Not even to you." Rose exhaled shakily. The weight on her chest eased. He meant it. He meant every word. Santino gently took her hand, the first time he'd ever initiated touch. He lifted it to his lips, brushing a kiss across her knuckles. Slow. Reverent. Grateful. "I don't know what the future looks like," he murmured. "But whatever it is, I want you in it." Her heart softened like warm wax. "I want that too," she admitted. It was the truth she'd been afraid to name. He stepped closer, their foreheads nearly touching, their breaths mingling in the soft, dim light. "Not tonight," she whispered. "Not fast. Not reckless." He nodded. "No rush." "Sarah needs stability," Rose continued. "She needs to know she comes first." "And she will," he said. "Every day. Always." The safe room was quiet except for their breaths. Rose's hand remained in his. His thumb brushed her knuckles softly, like he was memorizing her. And though they didn't kiss, though the moment stayed gentle, restrained, it was more intimate than any kiss could have been. Because it was real. It was earned. It was the beginning. A beginning carved from fear and danger, from trust and sacrifice, from two broken worlds finding a fragile bridge between them. A beginning they both knew would change everything. As they left the safe room, walking side by side, closer than they'd ever been, Rose felt something she hadn't felt since stepping foot into the Morello estate. Hope. Not for herself. For all of them. If you're still reading, you're part of this story now. Subscribe to stay with us till the end. Spring arrived quietly on the Morello estate. Not with loud colors or grand transformations, but with softness. With mornings that felt lighter. With air that didn't taste like fear anymore. Months had passed since Marco's betrayal shattered the old world. And slowly, beautifully, Santino, Sarah, and Rose began building a new one. A quieter one. A gentler one. One made of small miracles. Sarah changed first. Her voice came back slowly, like a shy guest knocking on the door. At first, it was single words whispered in Rose's direction. Water. Bird. Cat. Then short phrases. Rose, stay. Daddy's home. Story, please. Her panic episodes became rare. Her smiles became frequent, tiny at first, then wide enough to reach her eyes. The mansion staff began looking at her with something unfamiliar. Hope. The child who once flinched at the sound of footsteps now hummed as Rose brushed her hair in the mornings. She still startled sometimes, but she no longer froze. And when the world grew too loud, she simply reached for Rose's hand. Steady, trusting, certain. She's healing faster than her doctors ever predicted, her therapist said during a check-in. This level of recovery is extraordinary. Santino had stood behind the therapist, arms folded, pretending not to wipe away the tear that slipped from his eye. He'd only whispered one word. Rose. Rose changed too. She no longer walked the halls like a guest. The staff stopped whispering behind her back. Most of them, at least. Some even came to her for help understanding Sarah's quirks, what sounds to avoid, how to approach gently, when to step back. The mansion that once felt like a labyrinth of danger now felt, strangely, like a home she didn't dare to name yet. But the biggest change was Santino. He didn't hide behind emotional armor anymore. Not with her. Some nights, she found him helping Sarah color. Other nights, he'd appear in the doorway while Rose read bedtime stories, leaning silently against the frame, listening like the sound itself healed him. He never overstepped. Never pushed. Never rushed her. He simply stayed close. Close enough that she felt him in the room. Close enough that she knew she wasn't caring for Sarah alone. Close enough that something warm, dangerous but tender, began threading between them. One quiet night, everything changed. Rose was tucking Sarah into bed, smoothing the blanket with gentle hands. The lamp cast a soft glow over the room. Outside, the garden fountains whispered like distant lullabies. Sarah clutched her stuffed cat and looked at Rose with sleepy eyes. Sing, she whispered. Rose smiled. Of course. She sang softly, a melody her mother used to hum on difficult nights. The notes were low, tender, steady. Halfway through the lullaby, Sarah scooted closer, resting her head against Rose's arm. When the song ended, Sarah stayed still. Silent. Then, barely audible, she whispered. Please don't ever leave. Rose froze. Sarah touched her hand. You make the world quiet. The words weren't heavy. They didn't feel like chains. They felt like trust wrapped in silk. Rose's throat tightened. She leaned down and kissed Sarah's forehead. I'm not going anywhere, she whispered. I promise. But she wasn't the only one who heard. Behind her, somewhere in the hallway, a shadow moved. Santino. He hadn't stepped into the room, but his breath hitched loud enough for Rose to know he'd heard every word. Sarah fell asleep moments later. Rose stood slowly, smoothing the girl's hair one last time, then stepped into the hallway, expecting Santino to retreat or pretend he hadn't been listening. But he didn't move. He stood there, leaning against the wall, hands in his pockets, eyes bright with emotion he didn't bother hiding. The air between them was warm and fragile. Rose swallowed gently. You heard her. He nodded. I did. Silence stretched. Not heavy, but intimate. A silence that belonged to two people who'd walked through fire together. Santino, she's growing so much. She's healing. She's brave. She's all of that because of you, he said softly. Rose shook her head. She did the work. I just... No, he stepped closer, voice low but steady. Rose, look at me. She did. And his next words pulled the air from her lungs. You're not just her caregiver anymore. His voice trembled barely, not with fear, but with certainty. You're the reason she laughs. You're the reason she sleeps without waking in terror. You're the reason I can breathe again. Rose's heart thudded hard. Santino. Your family. he whispered. To her. To me. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel his warmth, close enough that his breath brushed her cheek. I'm not asking for a promise you're not ready to give. I'm not asking you to take on my world or my enemies. I'm not asking for anything except this. He lifted his hand, slowly, giving her every chance to step back, and gently brushed her cheek with the back of his fingers. This is your home if you want it, he murmured. Not as an employee. Not as a guest. Her breath hitched. As part of us. Her chest tightened. Words stuck in her throat. All the fear, all the love, all the tenderness she'd held back rushed forward like a tide. Santino, she whispered, voice shaking. What are you saying? He stepped even closer, his forehead nearly touching hers. I want to give you something no one in my world gets, he said softly. A future. Her eyes stung with sudden tears. Not a marriage, he added gently. Not yet. But a vow. He took her hand, the same hand she'd used to calm his daughter, soothe storms, and shield against bullets. Whatever comes, Santino whispered, we face it together. The words hit her like sunlight breaking through clouds. He wasn't offering power. He wasn't offering wealth. He wasn't offering protection as a debt. He was offering belonging. A place. A purpose. A promise. Rose's voice trembled. This is everything I didn't know I needed. And everything I never thought I deserved, he murmured. She squeezed his hand gently. Then yes. His breath caught. Yes, he echoed. Yes, she said. I choose this. I choose her. I choose us. Santino closed his eyes for a moment, just one moment, as if steadying himself against the force of emotion. When he opened them again, his gaze was soft in a way she'd never seen. He didn't kiss her. He simply pulled her into his arms, slow, reverent, grateful. Rose melted into him, the quiet of the hallway wrapping around them like a blessing. In that embrace, she felt the truth settle inside her. A new family had been forged, not by blood, not by power, but by love born in the quiet moments. Moments that healed wounds deeper than any bullet ever could. Later that night, when Rose returned to Sarah's bedside, the girl stirred and reached out sleepily. Rose, she murmured. I'm here, Rose whispered, brushing a curl from her forehead. Sarah smiled softly, and Rose realized the truth. This wasn't just a job anymore. It was home. If this finale warmed your heart, consider sharing it. Stories of kindness deserve to travel far.